Elliot Navarro was 80 years old, with decades of empires behind him, when he woke up in a luxury nursing home room that felt more like a golden cage than a refuge. In the days when he ruled over deals in New York, people crossed oceans to get 5 minutes with him. Now he sat at the edge of a hospital-style bed, silk robe faded from too many washes, crying quietly without even fully understanding where the pain began or ended. On the shelf beside him, a framed photo showed a much younger Elliot with his children, cutting the ribbon at the opening of one of his tallest towers. Back then, he loved repeating, "Family is the greatest asset." Today, the sentence tasted bitter. There were no more visits, no more calls, just the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway, always passing by, never stopping at his door. He took a slow breath. The only sound breaking the silence was the ticking clock in the corridor, counting seconds that seemed to leak into nothing. Outside, snow wrapped the city in a cold white blanket, perfectly matching the emptiness inside his chest. But everything began to change the day a 5-year-old girl, the daughter of the woman who cleaned those same corridors, walked into his room holding a red apple and a smile that would give back to Elliot something he honestly believed was gone for good. Before we dive into this story, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? Your state, your city, or your country? I love seeing how far these stories travel. The clock had just struck 6 in the morning when Elliot Navarro, founder of Navarro Properties, opened his eyes for what felt like the 1,000th time that week without really waking up. The room was huge, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Chicago skyline washed in the soft light of sunrise, towers he himself had ordered into existence. But the silence was so thick it felt glued to the walls. No message on his phone, no "good morning, Dad" from his sons, no sound at all, besides the faint whisper of the central air conditioner. A nurse came in slowly, balancing a breakfast tray on gloved hands. "Good morning, Mr. Navarro." He didn't answer. He just turned his face toward the window, like a man trying to hide from his own life. The smell of strong coffee filled the room, but nothing in him woke up. The tray stayed there untouched, like it did every day outside. Luxury cars slid down the avenue in a neat line. The world kept spinning, but the old magnate no longer belonged to it. For decades, Elliot had been the definition of power, a man who turned empty lots into vertical empires. At gala dinners, his name drew applause, contracts, and promises, but time, that silent business partner, started charging interest. First came the forced retirement, then his removal from the presidency, and finally, the cruelest blow, abandonment. His children, heirs to the empire, decided that the best thing for their father was a quiet place to rest. Quiet it was, painfully quiet. Bellevue Gardens, with its white columns and Italian leather chairs, looked like a 5-star hotel, with one difference: there was no one to share the room with. Elliot spent his afternoons staring down at the street, wondering how many of those rushed strangers had once depended on the opportunities he created. His ego, once inflated by numbers and applause, shrank in the face of absence. There wasn't enough luxury in the world to fill the emptiness of a man forgotten by his own. In that marble and glass solitude, Elliot kept asking himself if wealth meant anything when there was no one who cared about what you'd built. Money could buy comfort, but it couldn't buy longing. A man who had once controlled the fate of hundreds now didn't even decide the time of his meals. And the worst part, no one seemed to notice, or maybe no one wanted to notice, that behind the expensive robe was just an old, tired, invisible man. While Elliot faced the luxurious silence of Bellevue Gardens, a few miles away, Joanna Reyes fought against the deafening noise of survival. Her alarm went off before sunrise, and she got up quickly, trying not to wake her 5-year-old daughter, Stella. Their small apartment in Westridge smelled like reheated coffee and cleaning products, the same scent that followed Joanna every single day. The walls were stained with damp patches, and the bathroom ceiling had a crack that seemed to grow along with her exhaustion. Joanna worked as outsourced cleaning staff at that same luxury nursing home where Elliot lived. She spent hours polishing floors she would never walk across with peace of mind. Her hands were marked by chemicals, her knees ached from kneeling in front of other people's shine. But her eyes still held sparks of hope. "One day, things will get better," she whispered to herself as she tied her hair back and straightened her faded blue uniform. Her daughter Stella was the sun of that tiny apartment lively. Curious, she turned empty bottles into toys and the floor into a stage for colorful drawings. Joanna bent over backwards to keep that smile intact, even when the money barely covered rent and the medication for her sick mother, Belinda, who'd been in a public hospital for weeks. Every bus Joanna took was a reminder of how far she still was from stability, and the closest she came to comfort was seeing Stella sleep peacefully. At work, she moved like someone trying to be invisible. The residents rarely noticed her, and many of the staff treated her like part of the furniture. Even so, Joanna cleaned every corner with care. Deep down, she believed that caring was a form of resistance, her quiet way of proving that dignity doesn't require status. Sometimes, while scrubbing the polished lobby floor, she'd look out the large windows and wonder what it would be like to live like the people inside. It was between these two worlds, the man who had everything and the woman who barely had anything, that fate started threading its story. Joanna had no idea her little girl was about to become the thread that stitched both sides together. Luxury and simplicity were about to collide, and what came next would completely transform what wealth meant for everyone involved. It was on an ordinary day, with no promise of change, that Stella found herself in the middle of a world she'd never seen before. The daycare had closed unexpectedly, and with no one else to watch her, Joanna took her along to work. At Bellevue Gardens, the marble walls and plush armchairs were a brand new universe. Stella couldn't hide her curiosity. Every hallway felt like a maze of beautiful, strange things. While Joanna focused on her cleaning routine, the girl wandered with small, careful steps, eyes sparkling with discovery. She slowly drifted away from the staff dining room and ended up in a large, common area where several residents sat, their faces tired, watching life pass by with little energy. But something there drew Stella's attention. A man sitting alone near the window, staring outside with an expression of quiet pain. Elliot Navarro didn't notice the little girl until she was standing in front of him, holding a red apple in her small hands. The contrast was immediate. An old, wealthy man crumbling under unbearable loneliness, and a 5-year-old child full of light and life. She looked at him with the natural confidence of someone who expects nothing in return, held out the apple, and in a soft voice said, "Do you want an apple? It'll make you feel better." The simplicity of her gesture felt as unexpected as it was powerful. Elliot, who hadn't smiled in months, looked at the apple, then at the girl. Something moved inside him. He didn't know what was happening, but he felt a tightness in his chest. "I don't want it," he answered, voice hoarse. Stella didn't flinch. She insisted gently with the same calm tone. "I know you'll feel better when my mom is sad. She gives me an apple." She waited, eyes fixed on him, hoping the old man would accept that tiny gift. Elliot hesitated. Then, almost without realizing it, he took the apple from her hand. Stella smiled, sat beside him with no hurry, and opened the little notebook she carried, starting to draw. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was welcoming, like for a moment time had stopped. The grief that had felt unbearable minutes before seemed a bit lighter now. Elliot took a bite. A sweet taste filled his mouth, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt a kind of comfort that was actually real. Stella's presence opened a crack in his loneliness. She didn't say much, but her simplicity and her light made him start rethinking everything he'd left behind. In one tiny gesture, she did more for him than any polite, forced visit from his children could have done. And without knowing it, Stella had just become the key to a change he never saw coming. After that first encounter, something almost invisible shifted inside Bellevue Gardens. Elliot found himself waiting, though he'd never admit it, for the return of the little girl with the curious eyes and easy smile. At first, he thought she'd be just a brief memory. But that small act had planted a seed in soil he believed was long dead. When Stella came back, brought again by Joanna, who had no one else to leave her with, the old millionaire didn't pretend indifference. "You came back," he murmured. "I told you I'd come check if you were feeling better," she answered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The two of them began to talk at first, just short phrases. But soon, stories, questions, and shy laughter started to flow. Stella talked about her mom, about her grandmother in the hospital, about her dream of having a house with a yard and a dog. Elliot listened, captivated by the purity of someone who still didn't know the weight of betrayal and disappointment. Little by little, he began to open up too, telling her about the buildings he'd raised, his fear of dying forgotten, and the children who had placed him there as if loneliness was some type of treatment. Their friendship became routine. Stella arrived with colorful drawings, and Elliot kept every single one in a drawer, like priceless masterpieces. "One day you're going to smile for real, Grandpa Elliot," she'd say, with a sweetness only a child could carry. He laughed, and that laughter, still small, still fragile, echoed down the hallway, drawing surprised looks from the staff. "He's different," they whispered, and they were right. The man who once refused to even get out of bed now joined small activities, accepted his coffee, and talked to the other residents. Meanwhile, Joanna watched from a distance, not fully understanding what was happening. She knew her daughter had a special connection with the old man, but not how deep it ran. Sometimes she'd stop in the hallway and take in the scene. The broken billionaire and the little girl sitting on the floor beside him, drawing together in silence. It was as if time moved slower inside that frame. That simple picture had more power than any speech on empathy or faith. At the end of one of those afternoons, when Stella hugged him tightly before leaving, Elliot stayed by the window, feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time. A desire to keep living. The apple, the smile, the friendship. All together, they reminded him that true wealth doesn't live in what you keep, but in what you share. And if you've ever had something small, an encounter, a word, a gesture that helped you find meaning again, share it in the comments. Sometimes what saves someone's life looks almost insignificant from the outside. In the days that followed, Bellevue Gardens felt like a different place. The man who once barely spoke now greeted staff, had coffee with other residents, and even managed a smile here and there. But inside Elliot Navarro, something deeper had awakened, a mixture of indignation and strength he thought time had stolen for good. During one of their talks, Stella asked the question that split everything open. "Grandpa, why are you here and not in your big pretty house?" The innocence of it hit straight at the wound. He took a few seconds before answering, "Because my children thought this would be better." Sentence echoed in his head all day. Better for whom? The girl's eyes hadn't just given him hope. They'd given him his dignity back, and dignity does not accept being trampled. At the end of that week, Elliot called the nursing home administrator and asked for a phone. Then he dialed a name he hadn't spoken in months. Charles Merrill, his attorney and longtime friend. "Charles, I need you." On the other end of the line, silence turned quickly to shock. "Elliot, I thought your boys said you didn't want contact." "They lied," Elliot replied quietly. "I want to know what they've done with my company." Investigation started quietly. Documents were pulled, forged signatures uncovered, and what Elliot feared became painfully clear. His sons had sold off a large portion of Navarro properties without his consent, siphoning funds and using his name in illegal transactions. "They took everything, Charles, everything I built. There's still time to fix this," the lawyer said calmly, "but you have to be ready to fight." For the first time in years, Elliot felt truly alive. This was the kind of battle he knew how to fight. But now, for the first time, he wasn't fighting for ego. He was fighting for justice, The following months were intense. Lawsuits were filed, hearings scheduled, testimony taken. His sons, Lucas and David, stood in court with cold eyes. "Dad, you're old, you're being manipulated," they argued, yet held their gaze. Old, yes. Never. Sold what was never yours to sell. When the judge read the verdict, the room fell silent. The sales were annulled. Control of the company was restored to Elliot. The sons lost their positions and any right to represent Navarro properties. The billionaire everyone had written off got back on his feet, not with arrogance, but with the calm of a man who finally stood in his own truth again. That night, back at Bellevue Gardens, Elliot looked out the window and caught his reflection. The man in the glass was no longer the same one who used to cry alone. The wealth surrounding him had never brought him peace, yet the humility Stella had awakened had given him something much more powerful, the strength to start over with purpose. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters," he murmured. In the hallway, he heard a familiar sound, light footsteps, a child's laugh. She was there again. Stella ran up to him, clutching a new drawing. "Grandpa, you look different." "I think I am," he smiled. "Win? In a way, yes. But the one who taught me how to fight again was you." She hugged him tight, and he hugged her back with trembling arms. There, in the middle of a luxury nursing home, a billionaire rediscovered what real victory looks like. Not the victory of those who have more, but of those who refuse to stop being human. With justice done, Elliot returned to Bellevue Gardens carrying something rare: peace. Revenge hadn't brought him joy, but integrity had. Even so, there was a debt his heart couldn't ignore. With every visit from Stella, he felt more clearly how much he owed that child. And the woman who raised her, Joanna, had never asked for anything, never changed her behavior to get close. She just kept cleaning the corridors, exhausted, with the same gentle manner of someone who still believed in the value of honest work. Elliot, a man who had spent a lifetime buying everything with money, finally understood that some people could only be repaid with respect and compassion. On a Monday morning, Elliot called his lawyer again. "I want to help someone," he said, "but I don't want them to know it was me." There was a brief pause, then a restrained chuckle on the other end. "It's new, coming from you." "Maybe it took me too long to learn what humility is," Elliot replied. Within a few weeks, quietly, Charles handled everything. A new employment contract was drawn up, this time directly with Bellevue Gardens, guaranteeing Joanna a decent salary, full benefits, and real job security. When the news came, Joanna could barely process it. "You're being hired on permanently, with full health coverage and a raise," the administrator said with a smile. Joanna froze. "Is this real?" "I thought it was some kind of mistake." "It's not a mistake," the woman replied. "It's earned." It felt like a miracle. On that same day, the hospital called. Her mother, Belinda, had been accepted into an experimental medical program with full treatment covered. Joanna cried so hard she had to sit down. She didn't know where so much unexpected grace was coming from. She just knew that for the first time in years, she could breathe without being afraid of tomorrow. On the other side of the building, from the second-floor window, Elliot watched as Joanna hugged Stella in the hallway and tried to hide her tears. He knew she would probably never find out the full story, and he liked it that way. He realized that the highest form of generosity is giving without needing credit. And maybe, in some way, Stella understood everything without anyone having to explain. That afternoon, she found him and, as always, settled on the floor beside his chair. "You look happy today, Grandpa." "The world got a little fairer today," he answered with a quiet smile. From that day on, something in the entire nursing home started to shift. Staff seemed lighter, residents more talkative, even the mornings felt less gray. It was as if Elliot's silent gesture had spread a new kind of energy through the place. Power, he realized, had never truly lived in the towers he built. It lived in the hearts he was finally starting to touch. The months that followed were like the slow sunrise of a new day inside Bellevue Gardens. Elliot Navarro, the man who once lived surrounded by gold and emptiness, now woke up early, pulled on a simple sweater, and went downstairs for breakfast with the other residents. The same man who used to turn his face away from the world now laughed at Mr. Martin's jokes, played dominoes with Mrs. Clara, and joined the craft sessions. "You've changed, Elliot," the administrator said one morning. "I didn't change," he answered calmly. "I just found myself again." Stella, of course, remained the living pulse of that place. She ran through the corridors with her colorful drawings, greeted every resident by name, and managed to make even the grumpiest faces soften. The friendship between her and Elliot became almost sacred. Every week she showed up with something new, a story, a scribbled page, a crushing hug. In return, he shared small lessons: how to tell time on a wristwatch, how to count change, how not to give up on a dream. He called him my grandpa from the heart. He called her my little star. Elliot's transformation didn't go unnoticed. The nursing home, once a cold and mechanical place, began to feel like a home. There was music, laughter, even small parties. When someone asked what had happened to the grumpy old billionaire, the staff would simply say, "A little girl taught him how to smile again." The ego that once held him up gave way to gratitude. The power that used to isolate him now brought him closer to people. A man who had once measured worth by net worth now measured richness in hugs and honest looks. Joanna, too, began to bloom with her new job. She managed to reorganize her life, guarantee her mother's treatment, and slowly let herself dream again. One morning, crossing the courtyard, she saw Elliot talking with Stella and paused for a second just to watch. There was no trace of arrogance left in him. The billionaire who had built towers now seemed more interested in building bonds. She smiled, not knowing exactly why, but feeling deep down that something profoundly right had happened. That same evening, as the sun set and painted the sky gold, Elliot and Stella sat side by side, looking out the big window. "Grandpa, do you still get sad sometimes?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Sometimes, yes. But now it goes away faster, because I remember I have you, and that's enough." She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. The silence that once weighed them down was now peaceful. For the first time in many years, Elliot felt he was exactly where he was meant to be: present, alive, loved. It was a quiet afternoon at Bellevue Gardens. Sunlight poured in through the huge windows, casting that golden glow Elliot had grown to love across the floor. Sat in his favorite armchair, calm, holding a small picture frame in his hands. Inside, it was one of Stella's drawings, the two of them sitting by the window, smiling. In the corner, in shaky letters, she'd written, "For Grandpa Elliot, who learned to smile again." That flimsy sheet of paper was worth more than any contract he'd ever signed. Across the room, Stella came running toward him, backpack bouncing. "Grandpa, look, I got a gold star at school." He laughed genuinely. "I knew you would." She sat beside him in the exact spot where everything had started and pulled out an apple, slicing it with a little toy knife. "One half?" Elliot looked at the fruit, and for a heartbeat, time folded back to that first day, the day a child rescued him with a simple gesture. He accepted, took a bite, and smiled. "You know, Stella, an apple is what saved me." Shrugged, all innocence. "I just wanted you to be happy." In that moment, something became crystal clear to Elliot. He had spent a lifetime building towers that touched the sky, but it took a child to teach him how to touch the ground. The apple, the smile, the affection, small symbols of a massive transformation. A man who had measured success in numbers was finally learning what true value was. While the world outside kept chasing power, he finally understood that the greatest power of all is the power to change someone's life. Even if it's through a gesture nobody else notices. The entire nursing home felt the impact of their friendship. Residents seemed more alive, staff more gentle, and even family visits, once rare, became more frequent. What began with an apple had turned into a quiet reminder of our shared humanity. When people asked Elliot how he wanted to be remembered, his answer was simple: as someone who learned to be grateful. Deep down, he knew his true legacy wasn't Navarro properties. It lived in the heart of a little girl who made him believe again. Later, as the sun went down, Stella hugged him the way she always did. "See you next week, Grandpa. I'll be right here, my star." And he stayed alone, but never again lonely. Beside his bed, the apple lay sliced in half on the plate, a symbol of a bond that would outlive both of them. Half his, half hers, sharing a small piece of life. Elliot smiled, looked out the window and whispered, "Thank you." In that quiet peace, he knew at last that he was complete. In the end, what was left of Elliot Navarro weren't the towers that bore his name or the contracts that made him a legend among Manhattan tycoons. His real legacy fit inside a single apple, cut in two. Half his, half a little girl's, who taught him how to feel again. It was there, between the silence of a nursing home and Stella's light laughter, that he discovered the greatest power anyone can hold, the power to touch another person's heart. Life hadn't taken Elliot's fortune away. It had taken away its meaning, and it took someone with nothing to remind him of what truly matters. The warmth of a hug, the sound of a genuine laugh, the beauty of a gesture with no hidden agenda. Sometimes humility doesn't enter the life of the arrogant as punishment, but as healing. In Elliot's case, healing came in the shape of a child's smile and a red apple. As the sun set over New York, the old billionaire finally understood that real wealth was never locked in vaults. It lived in the bonds that survived time. And maybe, deep down, that's what all of us are looking for. Someone who can look at us with tenderness and remind us we still matter. And you? What moved you the most in this story? The girl's simple gesture, Elliot's transformation, or the twist of fate that brought them together? I truly want to know what stayed with you after hearing this. If this video touched you, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories, ones that don't just entertain, but make you feel. Because sometimes all it takes to change a life is one small gesture and a heart willing to see it.